Hello, and welcome to Finding the Words, the podcast for text based art and artists. Now, I know I always say artist, but that doesn't mean every guest has to be an artist. My guest could also be someone who's trying to spotlight text based artists as well, or maybe has a wealth of knowledge on the topic that they can share with us. Maybe they've put something out into the world of immense interest to those of us who find this wacky genre intriguing. Well, today's guest, Eloisa Hernandez Viramontes, more than checks all those boxes. You may know her as the force behind the Word Artworks Instagram account, but she's also been a highly respected art researcher in the Mexico City area and just released a new book a few months ago, The Word as an Artistic Language, Textual Practices in Mexico, which is the first book ever to tackle Mexican text-based art. If you like all that, then you'll love my conversation with Eloisa Hernandez Viramontes. See what I did there? Word artworks. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. So Eloisa is the author of The Word as an Artistic Language, Textual Practices in Mexico. This is the first book ever on text-based art from Mexico, and you've been you have a master's in modern and contemporary art. You're an independent researcher. You've worked with multiple museums in Mexico, as well as a collaboration with the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. When did you first become interested in text-based art?
Well, it was a long time ago. I started my research thesis for the master degree on textual practices on the international
Hmm.
scene and also in Mexico. And well, all it started when I knew the work of Joseph Kossut and Robert Barry, Lawrence Weiner, and also Edward Ruchet. And it was like these works are like in the intersection of the readable and the visible. So I asked myself about these kind of works. How do you approach to them? How do you see them? Do you see them? Do you read them? So this got my interest, and so I engaged with these practices and started to research if in Mexico this kind of practices existed. So that's why and how I started to research about this.
Hmm. Yeah, and it seems to me that obviously since yours is the first book to ever go into this particular topic, and it's not exactly here in the States, it's not really seen as its own standalone genre, it seems like, or not really thought of as in the same way as figuration or abstraction or whatever. Why do you think it is that text-based art doesn't get more attention as a legitimate standalone genre?
Well, it's the textual practices are kind of difficult to understand sometimes
Hmm.
because they can be like more familiar to people because we are uh, every day with language using, but for the same reason, some people like feel like this is not art, right? Because you can see text in advertising, in graphic design, in illustrations. There are so many creative practices or production that are similar to text-based art that sometimes there's uh, I don't know how to say it in English, but like a stop or something that um,
Hmm.
people are sometimes doubtful about their artistic um, line. So this is why also I intend to promote and to make more visible these practices because they have been in art history since many years ago. So
Hmm.
it's the moment that we really appreciate and understand them also as an artistic language.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could, in a way, say that they go all the way back to the beginning, like cave drawings, even though those were, you know, that was their text back then, drawing a picture of the buffalo or whatever that they were hunting.
Of course.
And do you think it's partially like people? It's the old. Well, I could have done that.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
Ye-
So
yes.
no. Now, I first, yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, yes. In fact, there was a case in Mexico, some decades ago, that an artist, Roger von Gunten, had a situation, a legal situation with like an art promoting company, and they asked him to pay with work, and he made a series of like 15 or 20 paintings only with text explaining all the process that he lived during the legal situation. And once he gave them the pieces, they said, no, this is not art. We cannot receive these works as a payment from you. So a recognized art historian here in Mexico reevaluated the situation and said, no, this, of course, this is art. No, so, but there are many people that still are like confused or with doubts about these kind of practices.
Hmm. No, definitely. And now I first became aware of you through your Instagram page, Word Artworks, and I started looking at that and then realized that you had a book and that you were a highly respected academic scholar. And it's kind of funny. An Instagram page seems almost kind of counterintuitive. What motivated you to start the site
Well, I started the
or the page?
Word Artworks account nearly 5 years ago, a few
Hmm.
months after I joined Instagram. After opening my personal account and seeing all the visual culture that was on the social media, I thought it could be a good idea to continue my passion for text based art in this new platform for me. And that's how I
Hmm.
decided to begin promoting these kinds of textual aesthetics. So
Hmm.
I already knew the work of many artists using text from my previous research. So it felt like a promising space to promote and make more visible the work of consolidated and also emergent artists. And well, I think Word Artworks has become a channel to get to know the work of so many artists I hadn't heard of before. And it has been an amazing journey where humor and also a relaxed mood permeate. So I really enjoy searching for the contents and sharing art on a platform where these text proposals can be reached by different and also bigger audiences.
Nice. And now I find a lot of the artists that I like to follow through your site or through your page rather. How do you find people?
Well, first of all, it's very nice to hear that you have learned of artists through the account, as it is one of the purposes of the Instagram page. So, I find many artists from different sources. One of them is precisely Instagram. In fact, I have learned about of text-based artists since I opened the account, but I also found it the contents in books. I have I receive newsletters from art magazines and galleries. Sometimes also visiting art fairs and exhibitions. So I'm always looking for text art everywhere I go.
Yeah, nice. Are there any particular, new emerging text-based artists that are really standing out to you right now?
Well, new artists can be new for me or young, but they are not emergent. I really
Mhm.
like to explore the works that explore poetics in a different way, with a very thought selection of materials and techniques, with a strong concept behind, and also with wordplay, with a clever use of words and language approach. So, well, I could say many names, but I think one of the works that I have published in my book is precisely one of a Brazilian artist based in Mexico City, Marila Dardot. And she has a piece called Diary, where she wrote with water on a wall in a residency space in Oaxaca. She wrote all the newspaper headers every day during almost a month, And well, this is a visual documentation about the process, and it's so poetic because you can see the words disappearing at the same time she's writing and we are reading. So this piece is about the ephemeral characteristic of the news and how the media selects what to talk about depending where and to whom something is happening. So this one is one of the works that I really admire. And well, there's also a young Mexican artist called Ivan Krasoyevich. He's not emergent, but he's young. I like his work very much also. He says he works textual pieces without text, but he does use text, but it's not visible in the final resolution.
Mm.
He has a series called Cancelled Poems, where he writes on the canvas some fragments of poems by Emily Dickinson or Octavio Paz, Sylvia Plath, and in the same space or disposition from the source. And then he covers these lines with a unique pictorial stroke. So he aims to reflect on the materiality of written language and to bring back to the pictorial the textual character of poetry. So this is
Mm.
very nice. And well, since I opened the Instagram account, I also discover Anatol Notek, for example, that he works in a very poetic and playful use of language that I like very much.
Now, for your book, how long were you working on this project?
Well, it was a long journey. As I said before, it began as an academic project. This was the topic of my master's degree thesis. So I must say I graduated more than 10 years ago. So it was there. I left it for a few years, and then I realized it was a good project to continue, but decided to focus only on the Mexican context, where no one has written before about text-based art with a general and historical approach, because in the international scene, there are so many publications. One of my main books I used for a guide, it was like Writing on the Wall by Simon Morley. And there are so many books, but it was I realized that in Mexico there wasn't any written about this. So it was a process of coming and going. It's really difficult to work on a book while you have a full-time job. So I could say it took like 5 intermittent years, but from the moment I decided to finally end the project, it was like 2 years ago.
Now, for someone like me, research means Google and Instagram. What kind of resources does an art researcher use?
Um, well, I must say that Google and Instagram are also a good source, especially when the artists you are researching are very young and there aren't any sources about their works. So they help a lot for me researching about emerging artists. But when the information is very recent, I think the best resource is directly from the artist. So also archives, books, interviews, and well, in the internet is also a useful tool. Because now there are universities who have digital libraries and archives online where you can read articles from past decades. There's the University of Iowa libraries, also the University of Wisconsin. And also there are platforms like JSTOR, for example, where you can find historical reviews from art magazines, and also academia, an online platform where many scholars share their essays. So yes, I think archives and libraries, books also are very important, but sometimes it's necessary also to go and look in the web.
So, in your research, what do you feel is the beginning of modern text based art? We talked a little bit about cave paintings potentially being the starting point, and you could even go back to illuminated manuscripts, but in terms of modern text-based art, what do you feel would be the beginnings?
Yes, I have always thought that experimental poetry is the starting point for the development of the visual exploration of text. So the avant-garde movements such as Dadaism, Futurism, also poets like Guillaume Apollinaire in Mexico are the Stridentistas, and poets like Marius de Sayas, Jose Juan Tablada, who explore with typography, dimensions of the fonts, the distributions inside the space. For example, also the calligrams. So all these elements were the key to start seeing the text and leaving its meaning in a second place. The text became an object and it acquired autonomy. So I think this was the moment. No, poetry detonated what we can call now text-based art. Well, I like to name them textual practices. But I must say that contemporary art is not only a visual experience. What we read and the technique and media the pieces are made of and produced with are of great relevance also for its final meaning.
Now, your book starts with the 20th century and it continues through to the modern day, and it's divided up into four chronological sections. Did you notice some defining characteristics for each era?
Yes, I think this answer could take a long. But yes, I think the social and the political context is an important key that always detonates different approaches to text art. So at the beginning, as I said, it was the poetry experimentations. In Mexico, also some political approaches with the muralistas, the Taller de Gráfica Popular, for example. And then in the 50s, with Matthias Geritz living in Mexico and his interest in concrete poetry influenced by Brazilian art. So also it took the linguistic sign to a three-dimensional dimension. Or also in this decade, poets and visual artists collaborated together. Then in the 60s, it was a complex context, social context here. So art students began to use posters and graphics to make social changes and protest through text art. And well, this kind of collective practice also was in the 70s with a phenomenon called Los Grupos, and they worked to change the traditional and conventional media. They left painting, they started to make happenings, use recycled materials, explore text within the city. So, and in the 90s, well, artists were like very, they disagree with the official situation about art. So they started to open independent spaces managed by their own. And they were looking for a wider approach to dialogue with the international scene. So, and as they started to use the everyday objects in their artistic proposals, text also was very important for them.
Now, do you feel that in these eras, what was happening in Mexico differed a lot from what was happening in the US and Europe?
I think that um, in modern art, poetry was also in Europe and the US the starting point for these practices. And currently, I think also there are like globally this there is like a similar way for many artists. Sometimes they work on topics locally about their own countries and perhaps using local materials. But I think that especially in the 60s or in the conceptual art period, there are some kind of differences because the context here was very different. I think that perhaps the tautological ideas by Kossuth, that they in the conceptual art they were trying to react against the abstract expressionism, sorry, and to try to intellectualize art. But here in Mexico, they needed to to change the situation. They were looking for a social change through art, and so in this period there's like a difference between the US, Europe, and Mexico. Yes.
Mhm, mhm. And anytime, I'm sure there were a lot of Mexican artists studying and exhibiting abroad. There were other people coming into Mexico from the US and Europe. Whenever you get that kind of cultural mixing, for the early 20th century Mexican artists, who were going abroad, were there things that they picked up and brought back, and vice versa? Were there some ideas that they exported with them and got started in Mexico and continued in, you know, France, America?
Yes, in the early 20th century, there were some Mexican artists living abroad. So, for example, Marius de Sayas, he lived in New York and also traveled to France, where he met Guillaume Apollinaire. So he was very near these new proposals, and he was also a promoter of modern art and experimental poetry alongside Alfred Stieglitz, with whom he published the uh, 291 magazine, also the name of Stieglitz Gallery in New York. Also, Jose Juan Tablada was another poet who was friend of the Sayas and was in New York. He collaborated in Mexico in the Revista Moderna. So I think all these relationships help too for this artistic dialogue and feedback, where the ideas were shared and brought to Mexico. For example, Diego Rivera also lived in Paris some years, and there's a phase in his painting where he uses text forms to create cubist compositions as a visual texture. Also, the Estudiantistas knew about all the avant-garde in the international scene, and they had a manifesto in the 20s, and there is a large list of poets and artists that were included in the manifesto. For example, Marinetti. So yes, I think that there was a feedback, and for example, the Estudiantistas have, they deny it, but their work
Mhm.
was very similar, like between the Cubists and the Futurists and the Dadaists. So yes, I think there was a feedback above all in the early 20th century.
Mhm. And you brought up Diego Rivera, and also Frida Kahlo gets mentioned in, I've only been able to read the intro to your book because unfortunately right now it is not
Yeah.
available in the United States yet. Hopefully it will be. We'll have to get our listeners on that to contact your publisher. So my mom will be calling them later. Um, but I didn't think about Rivera and Kahlo, but if like Kahlo's last painting was the Viva la Vida with the words carved into a watermelon. She had other stuff as well. Yeah, there's a lot of people that sneak into the genre that we don't usually think of.
Yes, yes. In fact, Frida Kahlo, she had a aesthetic that she appropriated or used
Mhm,
again from the ex votos. The ex votos were like some pieces that the people um, made, and they there was a painting about an event. It could be an accident or something, and there was the description where they were thankful with some the Virgin or some saints, and so they explained the situations that was in the image. So Kahlo has this relation with the ex votos, because in her paintings she always used to describe about the image with text. We usually don't think like Frida Kahlo is a text-based artist, I don't think so like that, but she was one of the pioneers that in Mexico that were linking text and image in her work.
Yeah, I mean, we don't think of a, like, I don't know, David Hockney as a text-based artist, but he used a lot at various points throughout.
Of
It's not gonna get lumped in. It's not gonna get held up with, like, an Ed Ruscha in that sense.
Of course, and I think that the text that Frida used in her paintings changed the meaning of the image absolutely, because there's a work called Unos cuantos piquetitos, for example, and there's the image of her in a bed, and well, there's many blood, and when you see the unos cuantos piquetitos, it's like just a few, I don't know how to say piquetitos.
A few little bites?
Perfect. When you read a text, all the image changes because it's like in another kind of humor.
So now this book has so much. There's over, am I correct on this, 80 artists mentioned in the book?
Yes, more than 60.
Correct. It's more than 6. Okay, so you there's a lot there. Have you been approached to curate a show based on the works in this book, possibly?
Well, I would love to make an exhibition
Yeah.
about this. I think it would be a strong and promising step to learn more about text
Mhm,
art, and above all, that people can get to know these proposals better as a kind of artistic language. So,
mhm.
um, in I think yes, it would be a very nice result from the book to spread text art in an exhibition.
Hopefully this helps, throw that out into the universe a little bit. We'll see if we
I
can.
that could be great. Yes.
One last question for you. What 4 artists would you put on your Mount Rushmore, your Hall of Fame of text-based art?
Well, I must say that, of course, Ed Ruscha.
Yes.
He was my starting point in this
Mhm.
journey, so definitely he's one of my favorite artists. Also, Joseph Kosuth. I admire very much his work. Oh, this is difficult because I like very much many artists, so it's very difficult. But
Yeah.
I
I had to put you on the spot a little bit.
um, well, I must say also Christopher Wool, and there are so many women artists that I also like. Perhaps Jenny Holzer and Tracy Emin. Tracy Emin, definitely.
Um,
Yes,
yeah, very nice. That would be a good show.
yes.
Well, Eloisa, thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Ken.
The book, once again, is The Word as an Artistic Language: Textual Practices in Mexico. And if you are able to find one, I suggest it. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken, for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you once again to Eloisa for coming on today. Check out that book. Check out her Instagram page, Word Artworks. But let's face it, if you're here, you're probably already checking that one out. And check out Finding the Words podcast Instagram account as well for news and updates. And until next time, take care.